What would you do if a single envelope revealed that your children weren't really yours? This discovery shattered my life, but it also led me to something I never saw coming, a chance to rebuild and find true happiness. Growing up, my life was often accompanied by the familiar hum of my father's favorite records playing softly in the background while my mother tirelessly kept the household running. My father, who worked long shifts at a factory, instilled in me the value of hard work, while my mother's unwavering resilience demonstrated the power of determination. Life in our small town often felt predictable, almost stagnant, but I learned to stay hopeful and curious, dreaming of a world beyond the confines of my childhood. I was particularly close to my older sister, Emily, who would secretly slip me novels and magazines she had hidden from our strict parents. Those stolen moments of reading about distant places and daring adventures sparked my first dreams of ambition. Though my family encouraged practical and modest goals, I quietly nurtured dreams of carving out a future defined by independence and achievement. One transformative summer when I was 14, I volunteered at our local library, a decision that would change the trajectory of my life. The library became a gateway to new ideas and diverse people, and it was there that I stumbled upon the stories of influential women who had forged their own paths in business. Their accomplishments stayed with me and became a source of quiet inspiration in the years that followed. However, my journey was not without its challenges. When I was 16, my father sustained a serious injury that left him unable to work. This forced my mother to take on multiple jobs just to keep us afloat. Watching their sacrifices deepened my resolve, not just to succeed for my own sake, but to uplift the family that had given me everything. This difficult period profoundly shaped my understanding of responsibility and the necessity of resilience, lessons that became pillars of my life. By the time I graduated high school, I was determined to break free from the constraints of our small town. I applied to universities far from home, knowing that education was the key to creating a better future. When I received an acceptance letter from a respected business program, I felt as though a door had finally opened, a chance to rewrite my story on my own terms. As I packed and prepared to leave, my mother handed me a small note, handwritten with care. It read, "Never forget where you come from, but always aim for where you want to go." Those words became a guiding mantra for me, a reminder to carry the lessons of my upbringing as I stepped into the next chapter of my life. I was determined to shape my future on my own terms. By the time I turned 37, I finally felt that the scattered pieces of my life had fallen into place. However, the road to this point was anything but smooth. In high school, I performed well academically, and while I wouldn't have been called traditionally beautiful, I wasn't unattractive either. Strangely enough, instead of worrying about aging, I found that my appearance actually seemed to improve as the years passed. Reflecting on it now, I feel immense gratitude for my journey, but back then, at 37, I struggled to truly appreciate the success and stability I had worked so tirelessly to achieve. My name is Emily Jones. I was the youngest of 3 children, born into a family living just outside of Buffalo, New York. By the time I reached adulthood, my older siblings had already settled down with their own families, freeing me from any pressure to carry on the family legacy. Since I was born later in my parents' lives, I was often pampered and, admittedly, a bit spoiled. Yet, despite this, I chose a practical and disciplined path, pursuing a degree in business administration. I quietly navigated the challenges of college, keeping my focus on my future. While in college, I dated occasionally but wasn't much of a partygoer. I considered myself an average student in many ways. At one point, I believed I had found love, but that relationship ended in heartbreak when my boyfriend cheated on me. The betrayal left me deeply hurt and disillusioned about love and trust. After graduating, I decided I needed a fresh start. I moved to Seattle, determined to rebuild both my career and my confidence. It wasn't long before I secured a job at a mid-sized company, where I quickly became immersed in work. My natural business acumen didn't go unnoticed. Through determination and hard work, not through any special connections, I earned the trust and admiration of my supervisors. By my mid-20s, I had become a key member of the CEO's team, an indispensable asset whose contributions were recognized across the organization. My career flourished, but my personal life became increasingly guarded. I avoided deep relationships, hesitant to risk the kind of pain I had experienced before. By the time I was 37, I had achieved financial independence and early retirement was a real possibility. I was wealthy, successful, and admired by many, but the truth was that my personal life was nearly non-existent. Over the years, I had built walls to protect myself, walls that I now realized were difficult to break down. I had experienced my share of relationships over the years, including one with a much younger man, but none of them ever seemed to last. My family, still living in New York, came to view me as the distant, successful relative who rarely visited. The growing emotional and physical distance between us forced me to take a hard look at my priorities. Stepping away from the demands of work gave me the opportunity to reflect and gain clarity on what truly mattered in my life. That period of introspection marked a turning point for me. For the first time in years, I began to feel a sense of purpose that wasn't tied to my wealth or career accomplishments. I became actively involved in supporting various research initiatives and even participated in a few of their projects. This involvement reignited a spark of joy and fulfillment I hadn't felt in a very long time. It was the beginning of a deeply rewarding new chapter in my life. While people can study to become scientists, I quickly realized that true discovery and exploration require a passion that goes far beyond classroom learning. Interestingly, I had once aspired to become a surgeon, a goal that was nurtured by my fascination with the sciences during my early academic years. My passion extended to athletics as well. My swimming coach had seen great potential in me as a backstroke swimmer. He even suggested that I could serve as a reserve for the national team at major events like the World Championships. However, the idea of being a backup didn't sit well with me, and I eventually stepped away from competitive swimming to focus entirely on academics. As I delved deeper into my studies, particularly in fields like biology and the evolution of heightened senses such as smell and hearing, my academic pursuits consumed most of my time. Relationships became secondary. While I had a few steady girlfriends during college, most of those relationships ended once I began my PhD program. It was during those intense doctoral years that I met Sandra, a tall, striking brunette with captivating green eyes. Sandra was pursuing her own PhD in ornithology, and we quickly bonded over our mutual passion for biology. At first, everything felt perfectly aligned, but over time, frequent arguments and unresolved tensions began to erode our connection. I found myself growing increasingly frustrated with the constant strain in our relationship. Amidst this personal turmoil, I received an unexpected offer to lead the paleontology department at a university in the Midwest. The position had become available after the previous professor passed away following a long illness. The role promised not only financial stability but also significant career advancement. However, Sandra was hesitant about leaving the East Coast, where both of us had established professional networks and friendships. After many discussions, she eventually agreed to the move, and we sold our house to start fresh in the Midwest. I was 35 at the time, and while the new chapter offered professional promise, it also came with uncertainty about what the future held for our relationship. I had recently become the head of my department when an unexpected opportunity presented itself. Emily Jones, a wealthy philanthropist from Seattle, expressed both interest in funding and actively volunteering with our research team. While receiving grant applications was nothing out of the ordinary, her request to engage directly in our work stood out. Curious, I reached out to learn more about her goals and invited her to visit the campus to discuss her involvement. When I met Emily at the airport, I felt a curious mix of nerves and fascination. She planned to spend a week with us, getting to know the team and exploring how her contributions could best support our efforts. As I drove her to her hotel, I couldn't help but wonder what had drawn her so deeply to our field. Our department was composed of a diverse and talented group. At its heart was Stephen, a semi-retired professor emeritus who specialized in fossil reconstruction and still played an active role in many of our projects. His mentorship was invaluable to the entire team. Other key members included Robert Wasaki, a rising star in research, and Maria Georges, a dedicated postdoctoral fellow from Florida. We also had 2 PhD students, one from Maine and the other from Perth, Australia, as well as 2 lab assistants. Everyone was eager to meet Emily, and their excitement was palpable when she arrived. During her first day, Stephen outlined how she could contribute to our work. "You'll assist Kathy, our secretary, and collaborate with different team members," he explained, ensuring Emily had flexibility to explore various aspects of our projects. She adapted quickly, her enthusiasm contagious. I couldn't help but be impressed by her genuine curiosity and dedication. Although my professional life flourished, there was an emptiness I couldn't shake. My move to the Midwest had stirred a mixture of nostalgia and longing, particularly memories of my strained but meaningful relationship with Sandra. We had amicably parted ways but remained on good terms, though thoughts of what might have been lingered. Stephen, ever the supportive friend, met me at the airport when I first arrived for my new position, helping me settle in and offering encouragement. "Your schedule is yours to manage," he told me. "Take the initiative wherever you see fit." I initially started with modest 6-hour workdays, but before long, my commitment to the department led me to working full 8-hour days as I became deeply immersed in our activities. I frequently observed lectures and admired Stephen's natural talent as both a teacher and a leader. Yet, despite the fulfillment I found in my work, a sense of incompleteness shadowed my accomplishments. On summer weekends, Stephen often invited me to join his family for backyard barbecues. His wife, Sandra, was always warm and hospitable, and I enjoyed playing with their daughters. Still, these gatherings reminded me of the family I had never built for myself, leaving a dull ache in my heart. Eventually, I stopped attending the barbecues, choosing instead to explore the countryside on my own or go horseback riding to clear my mind. Around this time, I began dating Frank, a younger engineer. His easygoing nature provided a welcome distraction, though deep down, I knew I was still searching for something more meaningful to fill the void in my life. We met again in the city, a moment that marked a significant turning point for both of us. "Thank you, Emily," Stephen said warmly, prompting an eruption of applause throughout the room. I stood, feeling a wave of emotion, and as I spoke, my voice trembled with sincerity. "Thank you all," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "You've given me a renewed sense of purpose and a true sense of belonging." The gratitude in the room felt overwhelming, a powerful moment of connection I hadn't experienced in years. Stephen smiled and added, "Emily, we'd be honored if you joined us on the expedition." Through my tears, I grinned and replied without hesitation, "Count me in, Stephen. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Laughter and cheers filled the room as the dinner continued with renewed energy. Later that evening, I overheard Sandra sharing a thoughtful observation with Stephen. "Emily's achieved so much success, but she's deeply lonely because she doesn't have children. Being around our family reminds her of that void." Her words struck a chord. It helped me understand why Emily had immersed herself so completely in preparing for the upcoming Mongolian expedition. It was her way of finding peace and purpose amidst the emptiness. After the holidays, I traveled with Robert to Ulaanbaatar to finalize the expedition plans. We spent long days in meetings with representatives from Mongolia's Scientific Academy, Geological Survey, and various government ministries. Our expedition team was composed of specialists from diverse fields: paleobotanists, paleoarthropod experts, geophysicists, and geologists. Sandra eventually decided to join us, planning to conduct ornithological studies in the Gobi Desert while also spending time with our young daughters. Sandra and Emily formed a strong bond during the expedition, often taking turns caring for the girls. Emily's enthusiasm and warmth endeared her to the children, who adored her. Their laughter echoed through the camp as Emily entertained them with stories and guided them in exploring the desert landscape. As the snow began to melt, the Gobi Desert transformed into a lush green expanse, and we set up our base camp amid its renewed beauty. The weeks that followed brought remarkable discoveries, including a collection of smaller specimens that would inspire groundbreaking research for the next 15 years. Emily's contributions were pivotal, yet she consistently downplayed her role. "I'm just grateful to be part of something meaningful," she would say. We often teased her about her frequent horseback rides, playfully calling her a Mongolian shepherd, which always brought hearty laughter around the campfire. Upon returning to campus, I became absorbed in analyzing our findings, often losing track of time and skipping meals to spend hours in the lab. One afternoon, as I sorted through data, Sandra's earlier words about loneliness resurfaced in my thoughts. They stirred something personal and unsettling within me. Despite having no real reason to question Sandra's faithfulness, a lingering curiosity gnawed at me. By the end of that evening, I had made up my mind. On Sunday, while Sandra was out, I carefully gathered hair samples from my daughter's brush. It was a quiet, contemplative act, but one driven by a desire to confront the questions that had taken root in my mind. I was on the brink of uncovering truths that would shape the next chapter of my life. I discreetly visited the lab to submit the hair samples, blending them with my own in a batch of unrelated tests. The results would be sent to my office within a few days. Despite the turmoil stirring within me, I planned a celebratory dinner with Sandra, determined to create a semblance of normalcy. If the results confirmed what I dreaded, I wasn't sure how I'd face her, or myself, but I needed to know the truth to move forward. During this time, Emily and I grew closer. I confided in her about my doubts and fears. "What if I can never trust her again?" I asked one afternoon. Emily nodded quietly, her expression somber and understanding. "I get it," she said softly. In that vulnerable moment, I found solace in her presence. Though my world felt like it was crumbling, her quiet support reminded me that I wasn't entirely alone. Emily had shared her own reflections on loneliness, particularly how spending time with Stephen's family had awakened her maternal instincts. Playing with his daughters had stirred something within her, a deep longing to be a mother. Her brief relationship with Frank had further illuminated this realization. Yet, while she had let the connection with him fade, the dream of having children lingered, making her reflect on the choices she had yet to make. Meanwhile, the tension in my own life reached new heights. I spent an afternoon with Stephen, seated beside him as we discussed his daughters and the painful reality of his situation. Placing a hand gently on his for support, I asked carefully, "What's your plan for the girls? Will you tell them that you're not their biological father?" Stephen shook his head immediately. "No. They're too young. They see me as their real dad, and they love me. Telling them now would crush them. Maybe when they're older, around 16, I'll tell them." I hesitated, then asked, "Do you think knowing the truth earlier would have changed how you see family? Would it have made a difference?" Stephen sighed, slipping into a reflective tone as he often did when lecturing. "If the girls had been mine biologically, maybe reconciliation would have been possible. But now, every time I see Sandra, I'll be reminded of her betrayal. It would poison everything between us. Divorce is the best option," he said, his voice calm and devoid of resentment. His maturity and refusal to speak ill of Sandra reassured me that I was on the right path to clarity in my own life. Later, as we continued talking, I broached a personal topic that had weighed heavily on me. "Having your own kids seems important to you," I said, gauging his response. The idea of starting over and building a family with someone new had crossed both of our minds, and I didn't want to lose the chance to fulfill that dream with someone I admired and respected. Determined to be direct, I carefully asked, "What would you think if someone offered you the chance to have your own biological children?" He seemed caught off guard and chuckled softly. "That's a low-probability event for me," he replied, not fully grasping my meaning. I took a deep breath and rephrased it. "What if a woman promised you the opportunity to have biological children and be their father?" His jaw dropped slightly as the realization dawned on him. He relaxed for the first time in days, his voice lightening. "You know, I promised Sandra faithfulness, not blindness," he said with a chuckle. We shared a laugh, and I seized the moment to make my proposal. "If your fertility test comes back positive, I suggest we get married," I said with a mix of sincerity and optimism. "We can create a contract that protects both of us if things don't work out. But I believe in second chances, for both of us." Stephen looked at me thoughtfully, and for the first time, I saw a spark of hope in his eyes. We were both stepping into uncharted territory, but perhaps together, we could build something new and lasting. "I won't ask for child support," I assured Stephen gently. "You'll always have access to our children, but I'm not looking for a divorce down the road. I want a family with you, a real family." Stephen's eyes widened, stunned into silence. I softened my tone further, hoping to ease his apprehension. "Stephen, I'm serious about this. I don't plan on divorce. What I want is a true partnership, something we can build together from the ground up. We'll take things one step at a time, starting with what you need most right now." He seemed to be listening carefully, so I continued, "Find a good lawyer first. I can help you with that when you're ready. But when you confront Sandra, keep it simple. Don't mention me. Just tell her that you can't live with a cheater anymore, that's enough for now. Later, when the time is right, you can show her the DNA test results and explain things to the girls once they're old enough to understand." Stephen nodded slowly, absorbing my advice. "All right," he said with quiet resolve. I gave him a supportive smile. "Good. You'll know the right time to tell the girls. Until then, focus on yourself and what comes next." Later that day, as I reflected on everything, Emily's surprising offer still stood out in my mind. On the very same day I discovered that I wasn't my daughter's biological father. Emily, this beautiful, mature colleague who had become such an important part of my life, proposed the idea of building a family with me. It was surreal. If I had been just an ordinary man with a typical job, the idea of such an opportunity might have seemed inconceivable. But in my vulnerable state, I had confided in Emily. I had shown her the DNA results I hadn't even planned to share with anyone except my lawyer and Sandra. Yet Emily had seized the moment, persuading me to seriously consider her offer. The results from my fertility test arrived that same afternoon. The numbers were better than I could have imagined, my sperm count and motility were excellent, confirming that there were no biological obstacles preventing me from having children of my own. With this new knowledge came an even deeper sense of betrayal. Sandra couldn't blame infertility or any other medical excuse for her choices. As soon as I received the confirmation, I called Emily to share the news. She had anticipated this next step and was already prepared. "I have contact information for 2 divorce lawyers," she said calmly. "I recommend the female lawyer, she's known for being a shark in court." Her voice was steady and reassuring, but what surprised me most was her offer to cover the legal fees. "Consider it my way of supporting you through this transition," she added. The next day, armed with both emotional and practical support from Emily, I felt ready to face the road ahead. For the first time in weeks, I had a clear direction, and someone I could trust by my side. In the living room, Sandra stood across from Stephen, her face etched with concern. "What's going on?" she asked softly. "You've been so distant lately." Without saying a word, Stephen handed her the envelope containing the DNA test results. Sandra opened it and began to read. Her expression froze as tears silently streamed down her face. She didn't offer any cliched excuses or denials. Instead, she spoke carefully, her voice trembling. "Stephen. I see you've already packed. You're divorcing me. I know you won't believe this, but I haven't cheated since we moved here. Yes, before. I wasn't faithful, but after we came here, I've been honest." Stephen held up a hand to stop her. "We'll talk later, after the kids go to bed." Later that evening, Sandra sat across from him, her voice quiet but resigned. "Fine," she said, her tone softening. "We'll tell them the truth when they turn 18. They deserve to know. When that time comes, I'll also tell you who their biological fathers are. Until then, neither you nor they need to know." Her words felt empty to Stephen. He looked at her, his voice bitter. "Can I really trust a promise from a cheater?" Sandra broke down, her tears flowing freely. "Stephen, I betrayed you in the worst possible way," she admitted. "I thought I could keep it a secret forever, but I love you. You're the only father my daughters have ever known." Stephen shook his head slowly. The damage had been done, and no amount of pleading could erase it. In the weeks that followed, Emily's support became a lifeline for Stephen. They kept things professional at work, exchanging only brief glances in the hallways, though their phone calls helped him maintain his composure. After the court hearing, Sandra informed him that the divorce had been approved but required both of them to attend 3 sessions with a children's psychologist before it could be finalized. To their surprise, the sessions were productive. The psychologist commended their efforts to prioritize the girls' well-being, and Sandra's sole focus remained ensuring that Stephen stayed in the children's lives, which aligned perfectly with his own goals. Despite the pain, they both wanted the best for their daughters. Time passed, and as Stephen's personal life shifted, he found happiness with Emily. Their relationship deepened, and they decided to invite close friends and family to their wedding. Emily did not invite her estranged relatives, but Stephen's parents, his brother's family, and many colleagues, including Doug, came to support them. Everyone knew the difficult path Stephen had walked, especially given that his previous marriage had ended due to infidelity. Emily's role at the university had always been as a volunteer, so their marriage caused no complications at work. Together, they transitioned seamlessly into their new life as husband and wife, balancing both professional and personal goals with ease. For the first time in years, Stephen felt that everything was in alignment. His life had regained a sense of meaning and fulfillment. They celebrated their new beginning with a honeymoon spent on pristine beaches. One day, while relaxing under the warm sun, Emily smiled and took Stephen's hand. "This honeymoon is my true answer to your ring," she whispered. When they returned home, Emily soon discovered she was pregnant. Blood tests confirmed that the baby was healthy. The birth of their daughter, Rebecca, brought unparalleled joy to their lives. Stephen was overjoyed, often saying with pride, "I can't believe I'm this lucky." Becoming a mother at 40 was not without its challenges for Emily. Many women her age were already becoming grandmothers, but she embraced the experience with gratitude. Over the years, Stephen's daughters grew fond of visiting their home, spending time at the pool or playing tennis with their younger siblings. When Emily visited Sandra's house, their interactions remained polite but distant. Despite the undercurrent of tension, Emily sensed that Sandra respected the life and happiness she and Stephen had built together. Though Sandra undoubtedly envied their success, she seemed to accept the peace they had found. Emily and Stephen, at last, had the family they had both dreamed of, and their love continued to grow stronger with every new chapter they shared. Stephen confided in me that Sandra had promised to reveal the names of the biological fathers once their daughters turned 18. He mentioned that he was considering legal action to seek compensation from the men involved. However, I gently reassured him, saying, "We have more than enough for all 4 kids, Stephen. You don't need to make a decision right away. Just do what feels right for you and the girls." During a later trip to visit my parents, something incredible happened. Our grandchildren became the bridge that brought us closer. My parents, who had always been somewhat distant, adored Stephen and welcomed him warmly. While I didn't suddenly become their favorite child, our relationship improved significantly. Looking back, I realized that my decision to approve Stephen's grant application was the best choice I ever made. It didn't just lead to groundbreaking research, it led to the creation of our family, a constant source of joy and laughter. Stephen often reflects on how far we've come, saying, "Emily, you gave me the greatest challenge of my life when I was at my lowest, and it turned into the greatest happiness I've ever known. Our life was filled with both challenges and triumphs, but we embraced each moment. When discussing the future of our children, Stephen expressed concerns about ensuring their health and growth. I smiled confidently and replied, "That's my responsibility. We'll nurture them with love, stability, and good nutrition. Don't worry, we've got this." We laughed together, feeling grateful for everything we had. Our family grew beautifully. We had 2 biological children, Rebecca and Harry, who brought boundless energy and joy to our lives. At the same time, I continued to love and cherish my older stepdaughters, who visited every other weekend. They especially enjoyed playing with their younger siblings, often spending hours swimming in the pool or exploring the backyard together. I embraced my role as both mother and stepmother, finding fulfillment in nurturing the blended family we had built. Stephen was approached by a man named Patrick during a conversation at a work event. Patrick seemed curious but respectful. "Sandra mentioned you're a great dad," he said. "She also told me your divorce was amicable. I don't want to disrupt your relationship with your daughters." I appreciated Patrick's honesty and asked gently, "So, you're dating Sandra, but you haven't met my daughters yet?" Patrick confirmed this, adding that Sandra had spoken highly of me, praising my parenting and remarriage. However, my mind raced as I realized that Sandra was hiding the full truth from him. Patrick had no idea that the girls were the result of 2 separate affairs. Unable to hold back, I blurted out, "Patrick, you don't know the whole story." The complexities of Sandra's past continued to affect our present. Yet, while Sandra now lived alone, I had found peace and happiness in my life with Emily and our children. As a scientist, I often reflected on how DNA testing had reshaped family dynamics and legal responsibilities. The old Roman principle that the mother is always certain had been overturned by modern technology. Today, paternity could be definitively proven, altering family law in ways that held biological fathers accountable for child support if paternity was established early enough. Sandra's decisions and secrets had once shattered our world, but those same truths had led me to rebuild a stronger, more fulfilled life with Emily by my side. Together, we had created a family grounded in love, resilience, and honesty, values I would never take for granted.